problems that have been created are going to affect us on a physical level. I mean, in terms of individual sustenance, in terms of individual, just personal security of staying alive. So you need to have food storage. You need to have training. You need to have alternative currency, whether it's precious metals or ammunition for barter. It's actually come to that time where if you don't stock up, if you don't team up with your friends who are like-minded, and if you don't train up, because those supplies just by themselves are kind of useless unless you know exactly what you're doing with them. There's a learning curve with all of these things. It's time truly, folks, to stock up, team up, and train up to be ready for the dark days ahead.
And it only runs from bad to worse. We're not trying to be negative here, folks. They plan to collapse Western civilization to bring in social engineering. They're going to make you very poor and desperate to do that. They do it in every communist takeover. This is not a communist program, but the globalists are using communist re-education tools and even communist terminology now in army manuals that are declassified. So this is very, very dangerous. They use what's worked before. They've been preparing the ground here for a while. Tim in Wyoming has a question for our guest, Mr. Rawls. Go ahead, Tim.
Yes, hello. Thanks for taking my call. My question for you, Mr. Rawls, is Alex asked this question of listeners yesterday, and I never got a chance to call in and say what my line in the sand was. What is your line in the sand for when we should, basically stand up and be counted, so to speak? Because, I'm already doing as much as I can possibly do in my small town in Wyoming.
But I think a lot of that's targeting. I mean, the people around you are just minions of this system, so going after them doesn't do anything. That's why I'm defensive. At least if somebody's attacking me, I know they're in the wrong. But a lot of this is just exposing the operatives so that if everything does go to a shooting war, people know who the foreign enemy is. But Mr. Rawls, your comments?
Right. Well, I think everybody has to draw their own individual line, as it were. Because for someone who is a single person, for example, without a family, without children to worry about, that line in the sand might be a lot farther out than someone who has a large family to worry about. That they're going to, lock and load at a much later date than someone who doesn't have that level of responsibility for a family.
That's right. My line in the sand is protect my family, protect my community, not be offensive. I'm offensive with information, and then try to be defensive like a mother hen. But then at what point then do you go aggressive? And boy, once the people that are in a mother hen position go aggressive, that's when heads really roll, historically, correct?
Yes, and again, people have to be wise as serpents and meek as doves, as the Bible teaches. Right now, if you look at what happened with the Bundy Ranch and with the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, people who stood up too early, too vocally, and who made some tactical mistakes in terms of committing felonies on federal property are now feeling the wrath of the federal government with multiple felony charges.
They walked into
them.
A trap.
Yes, big time. And unfortunately, they all did it on camera, gave their names, and were seen on camera with weapons. And the sight of those weapons alone was used as felony charges of use of firearms to the commission of a felony.
And they thought just because they were, quote, in the right on a few issues, they didn't know about the optics. It was very, very foolish.
Right. And so people have to be wise about that sort of thing. You have to pick your fights. You have to choose your battles wisely. Don't tilt at windmills. That's one reason I've never gotten involved in, even though the tax system in the United States is inherently wrong. I chose not to fight the tax battle because I saw what happened to too many tax protesters.
Well, look, we're fighting the general globalist occupied takeover, that it's a worldwide takeover. It's illegitimate. We're occupied. We're not fighting each tentacle. We're exposing to everyone that this is an illegitimate takeover that's now more naked than ever.
Right. So, again, choose your battles wisely. And when you go to a public protest, you need to think very seriously about how far away you park your car, for example, so your license plate number won't be photographed, and whether or not you're going to disguise yourself. But don't be buffaloed into not attending at all.
Well, I say either choose to be totally public or be underground. That's the model I think. People should either be completely underground or totally out in the open. I'm totally out in the open. James Leslie Rawls is our guest. I'm Alex Jones. Coming up at about 8 after, David Knight's going to take over to cover all the election news, a whole bunch of big interviews that our crew in multiple states have been getting following Donald Trump. That's in the 4th hour today. Many stations are picking up the 4th hour. Some don't, but anybody can find the video feeds and audio feeds at Infowars.com/show. Also, to be sent exclusive articles, exclusive videos, exclusive material, so we can stay in touch with you even when we're being attacked or the website's been taken down sometimes when we get hit. Infowars.com/newsletter. Just put in a random email you make just to get Infowars material or your regular email or whatever. Tell your friends and family, sign up as well so we can stay in contact with you. That is a key lower tech way for us to send you information that you can then spread on to others. Survivalblog.com. You know, I want to get Mr. Rawls on about his novel itself and Islam for a full hour or more in the near future. But right now, let's just go ahead and go back to calls. Speaking of the caliphate, more in Texas. You're on the air with James Leslie Rawls.
How y'all doing today?
Good, brother. Go ahead.
My question, and I don't want to be long-winded, but my question is, the original founders of Islam was black people, and it wasn't Arabs. So my question is, since the Europeans actually helped put the Arabs in charge, is it kind of like, I don't want to say justice, but is it payback for them allying with Arabs instead of black people as they should have allied with? That's my question.
All right. Well, let me try to throw... I mean, I get what you're saying, that it is true that the British Empire and others kind of set up Islam, put the Wahhabis in control, the worst sect, obviously, who did say that black people weren't humans in their, not the Quran, they wrote that afterwards, and kill all the blacks they find in areas of Africa. That's why I don't get so many blacks joining that form of Islam. But Mr. Rawls, you've studied this. What's your take on what he said?
Well, to begin with, I think the whole concept of race is spurious. I think there's only one race, and that's the human race.
Yes.
And for many, many years, kings and princes and parliaments have been trying to divide people by putting labels on the so-called races and to drive a wedge between people, to create conflict, which they can then manage to meet their goals. So I reject the whole concept of racism to begin with. That's right. It's balkanization. Thank you, Moore, but it's an interesting question. Well, I mean, here's Mexico. 6 months to a year hard labor. They torture you. They shock you. They beat you. That's in The Guardian. I said just last week, they beat you up. Mexico has some of the most draconian rules, but they can't have huge third world populations coming in. They'll collapse even worse. I'm not saying what they're doing is good. How are we supposed to take all these people, though, and give them everything free? I'm not against these poor Latin Americans, but the globalists are bringing them in, turning them into a tribal, racial-based group, even if that's a fraud, to then ally with the socialists and vote our guns away. What do we do then, Mr. Rawls? Well, we need to reject racism. We need to point out when it's being used as a psychological weapon. And we can't fall for the race baiting. It's important that we recognize that as American citizens, we represent the end result of what our founding fathers had in mind. And it actually worked remarkably well for many, many generations. And yeah, granted, we're in dire straits right now, and we've run up a huge national debt, but they cannot extinguish the spirit of individual liberty that still exists in this country.
I totally agree, but we can't have totally open borders and just bring people in and sign them up with the socialists.
No, that we have to be very protective of our borders. But for people who are American citizens, we have to fully bring them up in the culture.
Absolutely. We need to bring them in to the Renaissance. 70 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Rawls. Stay there. We'll be back with more calls. Matt and others. Infowars.com is the tip of the spear, folks. And I don't like that fact, but that's the way it is. So pray for us. We need it. Believe me. We are broadcasting worldwide. We are now well into the second hour. We'll be here till 3 o'clock Central Standard Time today. David Knight hosts the 4th hour. Now, until about 15 after next hour, Billy Corgan is our guest in studio. And then we have Dr. Andrew Wakefield, a true hero, coming on. He has been vindicated that autism is major league connected to infections in the gut. And that's even in the New York Times. And it turns out the British government did 2 studies previously that they classified that found the same thing that Dr. Wakefield had discovered. So there are lawsuits involved. His partner in the UK has now had his medical license given back to him. Robert De Niro, of course, was going to air it at the Tribeca Film Festival, the film Vaxxed, that was partially shot and produced here at the InfoWars News Center in Austin, Texas. And so it's obviously near and dear to us. And Robert De Niro said a high-level government official personally threatened him, but that everyone should see the film. So we're going to be talking about what vaccines are really doing. This is social control. This is social engineering. We have the CDC documents. They're scared. And just like the 9/11 Commission, and just like the Congressional Commission is suppressing the 28 pages, doesn't matter. Folks that have read it are going public, like Congressman Jones, Senator Graham, and others, bipartisan. And our government stood down with Saudi Arabia, with the Bushes, and bare minimum allowed the attacks to take place. The Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States, his family, his wife, for years was giving money transfers to the hijackers, who themselves were decoys. But the point is, it's all coming down. I was just talking to Billy Corgan, who is a super smart guy, and I'm not being patronizing. Everybody knows he is. He doesn't give a lot of interviews because mainstream media is dying. He wants to talk about that today. They twist everything you do. They're a bunch of critic snots that hate artists and people that, quite frankly, are smarter than them. And that's what social justice warrior crap is. It is the elite turning loose on the real intellectuals and artists and liberals, real liberals, turning loose basically fascists that call themselves liberals to attack anyone that gets outside the lines. And that's what's been happening. We've talked a lot about it behind the scenes. You've told me amazing stuff that I've talked to top executives that if they've confirmed, talked to other big rock stars, they've said, yeah, no, that's true. But you're one of the only people, because they go after Dave Mustaine. He had courage, but notice he hadn't been political in a while. I talk to him all the time, great guy. You still go public, even though when you come on, they come after you in hundreds of publications, but they're out of bullets. They're discredited. I mean, it's an honor. So I'm going to try to shut up because I get really excited when we hang out because your energy level is really good and it resonates with me, to talk about the state of the world. But you were really, during the last 5 minutes when we were on break, crystallizing so much. So I don't want to repeat what you said. I want to give you the floor, Billy Corgan, to break down here in studio in Austin, Texas, founder of Smashing Pumpkins, so many other successful bands. What is it, 40 million albums sold? We've got Smashing Pumpkins, Nexus.com. Just, really the last decade exposing global tyranny, or longer. You've been doing this for more than 2 decades. Where are we currently, in your view, as a species? Where is the planet? Why is everybody talking about the fact that they see a quickening happening? That's A. And then B, you said, look, I'm on a mission. This is what I want to talk about today. So you got the floor. Great to see you.
Thank you, buddy. I don't know how to follow that. You're so kind. Let's start here. For a while, I've been thinking about making a documentary about America, and it went from an idea that was maybe going to go with the Pumpkins album to now we're talking about trying to find a partner to make it a sort of a series and what's like the new model of television, like the 8-part, like the, there was that, everybody's talking about the making of a murder, it's like the kind of the new version of TV. It's like binge watching 8-part, sort of more looking at that model. So that's exciting because that takes it out of the typical 90-minute thing. So I traveled across the country in an RV writing songs with a buddy of mine who's a vet, 2 tours of Iraq, and another friend of mine who's a professional wrestler, good friends, and went around and interviewed a bunch of people about America and tried to have a conversation with people above the political discourse and above the cultural discourse, which is very, very difficult because the way most people relate these days is it starts with Obama this or Trump that, or did you see what so-and-so said about somebody else? Getting people to talk about America from a heartful point of view, their ancestors, which you talk about a lot. You've inspired me along that path too, to talk about their feelings about how they view America and whether the America that they grew up believing in or not believing in is real, or was it ever real? And what I found, it was really fascinating because I talked to people from every type of background, that most Americans have a very shared conception of what America means. And the 2 things that I heard over and over again were opportunity and hard work. That's something they learned from their ancestors.
That's our ethos.
That is in the American